Hi everyone in Algebra 2B, welcome to your last video of this school year. And this is your last lesson that you're going to be doing. I hope you guys had a great time at home, and I will hopefully be seeing you guys next year. So on to your questions on lesson 114B. I am going to start by moving the 3 to the other side, so adding 3. So it'd be negative absolute value of x is greater than negative 4. Then when I divide by negative 1, I also need to flip the sign. So that's going to be the absolute value of x is less than positive 4, which means that my two endpoints, I'm going to go, and integers is dots, not just a line with an arrow. So let's start at negative 4. And work our way to 4. Okay, so on 4 and negative 4, remember for the absolute value, you have to do the positive and the negative of that value. There's not going to be a dot there because there's no equal sign under it. And when it's less than, that means you're going to connect the dots between negative 4 and positive 4, which means that we will be filling in every dot between negative 4 and positive 4, but not filling in positive 4. And that is your result. Now looking at number 17, I'm going to start by splitting up the two inequalities. So I have 6 is not greater than x minus 4. And then I have x minus 4 is less than 8. So I'm going to start by flipping this inequality and adding the equal sign. So that'll be 6 is less than or equal to x minus 4. For this one, I'm going to just add 4 to the other side. So I have x is less than 12. And for this one, I'm going to add 4 to the other side. And I'm going to get 10 is less than or equal to x. But I do want to flip this whole inequality so that x is on the left side. So this would be x is greater than or equal to 10. So the two numbers that I have to graph on my number line are 10 and 12. I'm going to start at 8. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And that's my number line. Again, we're using integers. So that's going to be points, not a dot with an arrow. On 12, we're not going to have a filled in circle, and it's going to be less than 12. On 10, we're going to have a filled in circle, and it says greater than 10. So that would be to the right of 10, but strictly less than 12. So the only 2 points we could use would be 10 and 11. Now on to number 18. So this is going to be my first number. It's repeating decimal 2 times, so it's going to be n is going to be equal to 0.001056, and so on. So because there's 2 repeating decimals, I'm going to multiply this n by 100. So it would be 100 n, moves the decimal place over 2 spots, would be 0.10565656, and the repeating decimal. And we're actually subtracting these values from each other. So that means I'd have 99n on the left. On the right, the repeating decimals would all cancel out. And I would have 0.1056 minus 0.0010 basically. So I have 0.1046. Divide that by 99. We need to make that a whole number though, so I need to move the decimal point over 4 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I will get 1,046 over 990,000. that would be number 18. Now for number 19, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the x's in parentheses so I can graph this or complete the square. So x squared minus 4x, leave a space, and then plus 7. Half of negative 4 would be negative 2. When I square that, I would add 4, but remember you have to do the opposite to the outside. So you're going to subtract 4 from the outside. This positive side means it's going to face up. I'm going to set x minus 2 equal to 0 to find my axis of symmetry, which will be at x is equal to 2. And plus 3 is going to be the vertex. So at positive 2, I am going to have a dotted line. At 3, 1, 2, 3. And then from there, I'm going to go over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, and then over 2, up 1, 2, 3, 4, over 2, up 4. And this would be your diagram for your parabola. Now moving on to number 20. For this one, we have a formula. It's n is equal to first plus fraction times second minus the first. So n equals first plus fraction times second minus the first. And the way it shows up is fraction first second. So this would be 4 1/2 plus 3/8 times 6 1/4 minus 4 1/2. And we want to make those all into improper fractions. So that would be 9/2 plus 3/8 times 25/4 minus 9/2. I'm going to make that a common denominator so that I can subtract those two. Leaving this as 9/2 plus 3/8 times 25 minus 18 would be 7/4. So that would be 9/2 plus 21/32. So I would have to make a common denominator there, and I would multiply top and bottom by 16. So 16 times 9 plus 21 would be 165/32, and that would be your result. Now moving on to number 21, the first thing that I'm going to do is make those into improper fractions. So that would be 7/3 x plus 1/5y equals 10. To get rid of the fractions, I'm going to multiply this whole thing by 15, which means that I would end up with 5 times 7, which is 35x, plus 3y equals 150. Bottom equation, I'm going to multiply by 100 so that I end up with 3x minus 3y equals -36. Unfortunately for me, those y's are just going to cancel. So I would end up with 38x is equal to 150 minus 36 would be 114. Then divide that by 38 gives me that x is equal to 3. And now that I know what x is equal to, you can plug that into either the top or the bottom equation. I'm going to choose the bottom one because they have smaller numbers. So 3 times 3 minus 3y equals negative 36. 3 times 3 is 9, so I'm going to subtract 9. So I have negative 3y is equal to negative 45. So that means y is going to be equal to 15. Now looking at number 22, this one's a little tricky because there really isn't an easy letter to solve for. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solve for z on the top equation. And when I do that, I would move z to the right-hand side, the 8 to the left. So z would be equal to 3x minus 8. Now the only equation I can apply that to would be this equation here. So that would be 2y plus 3 times 3x minus 8 equals 2. Now 2y plus 9x minus 24 equals 2. Move the 24 to the other side. And I would have 9x plus 2y equals 26. And I'm going to add that to this equation here, the middle equation, because you'll notice that the y's are going to cancel out. And I would end up with 11x is equal to 22. And therefore, x is equal to 2. Once I know what x is equal to, I can solve for what y is equal to by plugging it into this middle equation. So it would be 2 times 2 minus 2y equals negative 4. So if I subtract 4 from the other side, I get negative 2y is equal to negative 8, which means that y is going to be equal to 4. Then I can solve for z because I'll plug in my x as well. So z would be equal to 3 times 2 minus 8. So 6 minus 8 would be negative 2. So z would be equal to negative 2. And that will conclude number 22. Now looking at number 23, I again need to solve for one of my variables. So I'm going to solve for y. And that would give me y is equal to 6 minus x. I'm going to plug that into the bottom. So x times 6 minus x equals negative 1. When I multiply that out, I'm going to get 6x minus x squared equals negative 1. So if I move everything over to the right-hand side, I would have 0 equals x squared minus 6x minus 1. And now you can either do quadratic formula or completing the square to solve for x. I'm going to do quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. So that would be positive 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 plus 4 over 2, which would be 6 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 40 over 2, which would simplify to 3 plus or minus the square root of 40 can be simplified. So 40 divided by 2 would be root 10. Because 2 root 10 divided by 2 would just be root 10. So this is what our x is going to be equal to. And then for our y, we're just going to plug this in. So it would be y equals 6 minus 3 plus or minus root 10. And that would just make this negative. So it would be y equals 6 minus 3 plus or minus root 10. So y would be equal to 3 plus or minus root 10 because 6 minus 3 is 3. Now moving on to number 24. The goal here is going to be to eliminate one of your letters when you add the two equations together. So I'm actually going to choose to eliminate y. So what I need to do is I need to multiply this equation by -1. That would give me negative x plus y minus z equals -3. I would be adding that to 2x minus y plus 2z equals 9. So that is going to give me x plus z equals 6. Now when I add these bottom two equations together, it actually already eliminates the y. So that would give me just x plus 3z equals 10. So now we have these two equations. We could either do substitution or we could do elimination. I'm going to do elimination by multiplying this by -1. So that'd be negative x minus z equals -6. Adding that to x plus 3z equals 10. My x's will cancel, and I will get 2z is equal to 4, so therefore z is equal to 2. Once I know what z is equal to, I'm going to take that and plug it back into this equation right here. So that would be x plus 2 equals 6. So therefore, x is going to be equal to 4. Now, once we know what x and z are, we can go back to any one of these equations to solve for y. I'm going to just choose the bottom one. So it would be -4 plus y plus 2 equals 1. -4 plus 2 would be y minus 2 equals 1. Move the 2, gives me y is equal to 3. So I have x is equal to 4, y is equal to 3, and then z is equal to 2. Now for number 25, you had to choose 2 points that were on the line that best fit those points. So I already chose 2 points right here as shown. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start by solving for the slope. So y1 minus y2, we're going to do 350 minus 850 over 80 minus 110. So 350 minus 850 would be -500. And then 80 minus 110 would be -30. So I get positive 50 over 3 would be my slope. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug that in to y equals mx plus b. And I need to solve for plus b. So I'm going to plug in this point right here because it's my smaller of my 2 points. So that'd be 350 equals 50 over 3 times 80 plus b. So that would be 350 equals 4,000 over 3 plus b. So b is going to be equal to, if I put 350 over 3, 350 times 3, and then minus 4,000 would be -2950 over 3. So your answer to fill into this equation right here would be O is equal to 50 over 3 x, or I, minus 2950 over 3. And those are just going to be estimated, so those are going to vary based off of the points that you chose. Now for number 26, I have I cubed, which is equivalent to negative I, and then I squared, which is negative 1. I to the 5th would be equivalent to just I. So really what I have is negative I plus 1 over I plus 2. And I'm going to multiply top and bottom by I minus 2. So negative I times I would be negative I squared. So it would be negative negative 1. Negative I times negative 2 would be positive 2I plus 1I and then minus 2 over I times I is I squared, so that's negative 1. And then minus 2I, then plus 2I, and then minus 4. So the i's are going to cancel. Then I have negative 2 plus 1 would be negative 1. 2i plus 1i would be 3i. That would be all over negative 5. And they do split that up in the answer key, which would be 1 over 5 minus 3 over 5i. Now for number 27, before I'm going to simplify this, I'm actually going to simplify the square root of 8, which is 2 root 2. So this would be 2 root 2. This would be 2 root 2. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by root 2 for this one, and then root 5 for this one. And then the square root of 40 would be 2 and 20, and then 2 and 10. So what I really have is the square root of 10 over 2 times 2, which should be 4, plus 4 root 10 over 5, minus 6 root 10 over 1. So the common denominator on this one is going to be 20. So I'm going to multiply this one by 20, this one by 4, and this one by 5. So really I have 5 root 10 plus 16 root 10 minus 120 root 10 all over 20. So I have 5 plus 16 minus 120 would be negative 99 root 10 all over 20. Now looking at number 28, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to move the square root of x over to the other side by adding it. Now you're going to square both sides. So that means the left side would just become x minus 15. The right-hand side would become 5 plus root x times 5 plus root x. And that would give you x minus 15 equals 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times root x is 5 root x. Root x times 5 would be 5 root x. Root x times root x would just be x. Now if there's a positive x on both sides, those are both going to cancel. I'm going to move the 25, I can just move it to the other side. So that would be negative 40 equals 10 root x. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 10. And then I'm going to get negative 4 equals square root of x. Square both sides, which would give me x is equal to 16. Now I do have to check this. So I'm going to plug it back in. So it'd be 16 minus 15 minus the square root of 16 equals 5. Square root of 16, this square root of 16 minus 15 would be 1 minus 4, which does not equal 5, but the answer is 16, which means that I must have made a mistake somewhere. So this must have been a plus sign, and this is a minus sign. So this should have been a plus sign, so that would be correct. So my bad, number 28, I think I messed up the signs there. Now moving on to number 29, the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to move everything over the left-hand side, and I'm also going to factor out an x. So that would be x, 5x squared plus 7x plus 2 equals 0. Now for step number 1, you're going to multiply the first and the last term. So that would be 5 times 2, which gives you 10. 5 plus 2 actually does give us 7x. So step 2, I found my factors of 10, which are going to be 5 and 2, and they add up to 7, which means that 7x is going to be replaced with 5x and 2x. So step number 3 will be x times 5x squared plus 5x plus 2x plus 2 equals 0. This will be my first parenthesis. This will be my second. So that would be 5x squared plus 5x plus 2x plus 2 equals 0. I'm going to factor out a 5 there and an x. So that would be 5x times x plus 1. And then I'm factoring out a 2 on this one, so that would be equals x plus 1. So this will be my first. So that's going to be x times x plus 1, and then what's left over would be 5x plus 2. So we're actually going to have 3 parentheses. We're going to have this one, and then this one, all set equal to 0. My first answer will be x is equal to 0. Second one, x plus 1 equals 0, so x will be equal to negative 1. So I so far have 2 answers. And the last one's going to be 5x plus 2 equals 0. So I'm going to move the 2 to the other side, so you get 5x equals negative 2. So x would be equal to negative 2 over 5. And that's number 29. And our last problem would be number 30. I'm going to square this. Be x to the 1/2 minus y to the negative 1/2 times x to the 1/2 minus y to the negative 1/2. Remember, when you multiply, you add exponents. So 1/2 plus 1/2 would be a whole, so that would just be x. Then it would be negative x to the 1/2 y to the negative 1/2. Middle terms would be x to the 1/2 y to the negative 1/2. 2 negatives make a positive, and negative 1/2 minus 1/2 would be negative 1. The last thing I can do is I can actually combine these two middle terms because they have the exact same exponent, giving me an answer of x minus 2 x to the 1/2 y to the negative 1/2 plus y to the negative 1. And that should conclude all of your questions from 114 Part B. Hope you guys all have an amazing summer, and make sure you guys still check in next week. Have a great rest of your summer. Bye.